Still want to get together.
Oh gosh, it's water. Well, I guess we'll get things started. Good morning, everyone. A little low turnout here, but we just checked. We have 45 people registered online. So as James mentioned, that's where everyone is. They're in bed watching virtually, but it's like it's raining or something, right? If only there was someone to blame for that. Well, my name is Max Saparis. I'm a meteorologist over at WKOW. We're proud sponsors with Clean Lakes Alliance for all their events, including our Science 101 Cafe here. I'd like to welcome everyone in person, of course, and everyone virtually that's here today. And we're looking at a new project on UW's campus that's moving into its second phase. That's what we'll be talking about for the next hour. Previously, the City of Madison, UW, and the state partnered for an in-stream sediment settling channel and stream bank restoration along Willow Creek. Yeah, Willow Creek needs a little work done, and it's going through. That area is on the west side of campus near the natatorium. It's currently being rebuilt. So a lot of work going on already over there, and this is in addition to that. So following the successful project, UW retained SmithGroup, an engineering firm that worked on this to carry out the landscape master plan. So what we once saw as just a stormwater creek is going to be transformed into a campus green space, complete with green infrastructure practices, community placemaking, and land stewardship. So again, a nice symbiotic relationship between people and nature. So a reminder that we'll be taking questions after our presentation. So get those in your head. That'll be both in person and for our virtual audience as well. And if you are online, use the QA section. You'll see a little rectangle with a little plus sign that you can click for that. and you can comment there, and we'll get those questions with Adam and Luke at the end. Before we start today's talk, I'd like to introduce Clean Lakes Alliance Executive Director James Tye with a few updates on what we're expecting ahead of today's speaker. James.
Thank you very much, Max. So the cue there is Max is a meteorologist, and so you can blame him for the rain. But as I look outside, it looks like a little bit of sun coming out, Max. So thank you. We'd also like to thank everybody who's joining us both here at the Edgewater today and online. And thank you to all of our Clean Lakes 101 sponsors. Our presenting sponsor, First Weber and Johnson Financial Group. Our hosting sponsor here at the Edgewater, of course, is our friends at the Edgewater Hotel. Supporting sponsor, National Guardian Life Insurance Company. And our production partners, the UW-Nelson Institute of Environmental Studies and UW Extension Lakes. As Max said, we're happy to have David as a media sponsor and appreciate all their support and promoting our events. We have a quick few updates. First, if you haven't renewed your friendship with the Clean Lakes Alliance or your business partnership, we would love to have you do that. We have a goal of raising $650,000 as our stretch goal, and we are way more than halfway towards that goal. And your smallest donation or the largest donation means a lot to the lakes. But before we get started today, I would like to take a moment and thank somebody who's meant a lot to the organization over the last several years. Alex Vadani, who has been a member of our community board, is now joining us as Director of Development, and he'll be starting next week. So welcome, Alex. So going to the next slide, I'd like to talk and thank Luke Wynn. Before we talk about Aaron a little bit. Luke is leaving us to move to his hometown in Memphis to be surrounded by family as him and his wife welcome their second child. They're expecting a child in March. And so we're really excited for Luke and his new growing family, and understand he wants to be with family and friends back home in Memphis. But I know Madison is dear to his heart, and we're really thankful for all the work Luke has done, from starting out as an intern to a full-time paid intern to an employee. And Luke has really helped us grow our volunteer days, championed our citizen monitoring network through lakeforecast.org. And we would just like Luke to come up and give him a little token of thank you. And wave to everybody out in the crowd in the online hybrid world as we say goodbye to Luke. Come on up, Luke. So if you haven't seen these, there are these wonderful maps that you can get, and we thought Luke needs to take a little bit of the Yahara Lakes back to Memphis. So from thanking everybody from the staff and our board. Thank you, Luke, and bon voyage across Lake Monona to Memphis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking of Monona Bay does not connect to Willow Creek. Willow Creek connects, you're going to hear more about that from today's talk, which is titled Willow Creek Landscape Master Plan. Here to present today, we are lucky to have Aaron Williams, who currently serves as the Interim Director of Campus Planning and Landscape Architecture. Aaron has been a liaison to the adjacent neighborhood throughout the campus. He's also a registered and licensed landscape architect and holds a degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Aaron is also on several community work groups, such as the Monona Waterfront, Public Works, and other areas connecting our citizens to our landscape and our lakes. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Aaron Williams.
Never been introduced as honorable. All right, that's good. Good morning, y'all. I didn't know I thought I had all 60 minutes. I don't. So I'm Aaron Williams, Interim Director, Campus Plan Landscape Architecture. This is just some of the involvement points here, just so you can see the breadth of stuff that I do get myself involved in, including shepherding the first bird ordinance here in the state of Wisconsin, which I'm pretty proud of. But what's more important is if anyone's came to the first version of this presentation, which was virtual, we were in the lockdown of COVID, and I was in my basement. My son would sketch the people he saw on screen. So this is art by Jack, and it is, if anyone else wants one of these for themselves, I can make that happen. It's really hard to see how stuff lands when you're in virtual, but in a room, it's nice to see some laughs, which is good. So today I'm talking about Willow Creek Landscape Advanced Planning Report, really the basis created by SmithGroup and Bloom, Jacob Blue and Nathan Hilmer from SmithGroup in particular, kind of the leads that we worked with on this. I'm going to give you sort of what that document's about. I'm going to take a couple pivots. I think you'll notice those pivots in the presentation. We'll talk a little bit about how we in campus planning perceive health and well-being. And then I'll talk a little bit about kind of the West Campus District Plan and what we're doing with that and how it kind of plugs in to this project. So hopefully it's somewhat seamless, but I've never kind of put all these topics together into one. So here we are. We're going to zoom in. Hopefully most people know where this is located. But really, Willow Creek itself, you wouldn't know it's there unless you're kind of looking for it on campus. But it was really the divide between kind of the west health side of campus and really embedded in the ag district of campus historically. And really those lines are starting to blend more and more. This planning study is built on the shoulders of other great studies that I have not been involved in, but many of these things all the way back from really the cultural landscape inventory that we did back in the day to, master plans from, 1995 forward. We've talked about this creek in particular, coming up all the way into the Lakeshore Nature Preserve master plan and what we're doing right now. So this is part of Lakeshore Nature Preserve, both sides of the creek. So that is an important sort of contextual point to know. The focus of the study, we wanted to determine scope, schedule, budget, really was the idea of that. We've done that. So now we're sort of in this area of determining the partners for the project, the funding opportunities. So we then can kind of, judge the timeline and when implementation might make some sense. I'll get to that a little later. Pending then, so things still out there, like it has to go to design, development, and construction documents. So we're not in that phase yet. So hydraulic sort of studies, hydrologic and hydrologic studies need to occur yet. Design, development, and CDs, specifications, things like that still have to occur. But that's why we're kind of getting this out here in front of people now. So maybe there's some, you're donating to the Clean Lakes Alliance. Maybe there's some opportunity here for the foundation. So what was this project all about? The advanced planning report. And essentially we do advanced planning before every major construction project on campus. That's a common term that you'll see used around campus. First and foremost, academic research and outreach programs, supporting those to the highest level that we can. I was very near and dear to me in sort of advancing ecosystem services, or the things that nature gives us for free. Pollination, provisioning, clean water, things like that. Fulfill and manage really the stewardship goals of Lakeshore Nature Preserve. That's going to be critical going forward, as this is not a maintained sort of landscape. It's a managed landscape, which is a different approach. Implementing sort of the goals of the planning that's come before, increasing health and wellness benefits. I'll talk about those. And then really providing a consolidated area for grounds, UW grounds. They're on a portion of the creek, and I'll show you where they're located. So phase 0, as I like to call it, and I think this was mentioned about the sedimentation removal chamber. So this is a facility which really the project led by the city. So Lauren Striegel, who's now I think with the Village of Oregon, but also Greg Freeze involved in doing this. And at the time seemed to be a fairly sort of controversial thing with the DNR and permitting. But what this project really did, and you can see some of the, this is the existing condition. And this is really at the mouth. So that A is really adjacent to Campus Drive as we're going through here. Existing conditions. What we did was really create a concrete bathtub for 200 feet at the mouth of the pipe that comes out of Campus Drive. So the idea here was that can we capture all this sediment that's being loaded through the really urbanized watershed, capture it before it gets into Willow Creek and then before it ultimately gets into the bay. So that was the idea here. Looking back on it, wouldn't have thought it would have been as difficult as it was, but it proved to be quite a Herculean sort of effort. The drawings here, it's hard to kind of tell what's going on, but there's literally an access drive down into this bay, so it can be cleaned out as we're going through it. And really what it does, it sets up a weir situation 200 feet away from the mouth of the pipe. There's a weir, and the idea is it traps the sediment that's going out into the bay. Restored the banks. So let's see. This actually, it's in Google Earth here. And we would feel that it was a success for the most part, except the planting. We used a mat sort of system initially, and we had to revegetate it almost initially after it was put in. But now I can say that has been successfully restored, and this thing is catching sediment like it's no one's business. So I think they thought, like 150 or so cubic yards would be caught. And right now, I mean, we're catching much more than that. You can see some of the cubic yards of sediment that's actually being caught. So we're having to empty it a lot more. So this is all sort of phosphorus laden, sediment that's not making it out into the lake. So we view this as a huge success and really as sort of a, Willow Creek's first phase 0 of transformation. So let's look at some of the master planning that's went into kind of where we are now with this plan. Way back in 2005, essentially, I think all of our plans, we must show like tan buildings as proposed and non-tan as sort of existing. But we talked about, this was envisioning sort of a vet med building. In 2005, we weren't even thinking about a new rec facility out here, which is the big, large black box just north of Observatory. And you can see some of the other planning, the fields, the near west fields and things like that were planned for. In 2015, then, the master plan, in assistance with SmithGroup again, really looked at kind of how can we make this a space in a place as we densify campus, as sort of east and west start to converge. This is going to become really a place that's going to see a lot more people. Faculty, staff, students, as we're adding square footage and amenities into this area. So, but is there any way to kind of take it back from this, what was once really a meandering sort of creek into, right now it's a channelized sort of backwater. How can we sort of amplify what it could be? So to understand the area a little, some of the characteristics of it. So there's a number of drumlins on campus. Willow Creek obviously is kind of in a saddle here. It's a drainage area for a reason. Soils are alkaline, mostly coalwood soil, which is a very hydric soil. So infiltration is not the best. High groundwater being next to the lake, obviously. We have sort of native burial mounds in the area, extant ones, so ones that are existing and still out there. And I should probably say, I mean, I don't have a land acknowledgement statement, but I mean, I should really say that, we're the UW-Madison's commitment to respect the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation and all that we're doing here on this land is critically important, which is, I think, reinforced by our shared future in that statement. So I probably should have led with that. Sorry. Yeah, and then this whole idea of a campus connector. So let's take some. So I talked about the soils, Coalwood. Interesting fun fact. This is the newest street on campus called Coalwood Drive. So I don't think this is egregious as naming things after the resource you deplete, but this area is surrounded by Coalwood soil. So that's where the name came from, if it's ever on a trivia test or anything. This is being done in conjunction here with the City of Madison Willow Creek watershed study. So this is an MSA city partnership. You can see this is the size of the watershed that essentially daylights at this pipe into Willow Creek. So this is really what that sedimentation basin was trying to capture. It's a very urbanized sort of watershed. What the city's looking at is sort of what upstream sort of solutions can they do? And you'll see that right now, University Ave being reconstructed. And one of the main sort of topics of that is increasing pipe size to accommodate volume and quantity. This shows generally where the lands of UW drain. So the blue is draining directly to Lake Mendota, whether by a pipe or it's final. If a drop of water lands in the blue, it's getting to a pipe or it's getting directly to Lake Mendota. If it lands in the green, it's going to Willow Creek. So we do have, I think, up to 14 or so pipes that actually discharge into Willow Creek. So through this process, looking at how do we disconnect those? How do we treat before the water actually does get into Willow Creek? And then, yeah, significantly, we do have all the red air actually goes to Monona Bay. Fun fact, it fills with solo cups after Badger games. So that's part of the whole neighborhood cleanup thing. But if you do see solo cups in Monona Bay, some of the reason is because of that. So here's pivot number one, and how us in campus planning are trying to use the physical environment to really amplify the health and well-being aspects. And I like to define these three terms, knowing that health is essentially absence of illness. That's not really what we're after. Wellness is kind of like, ride your bike to work sort of idea. But really what we're after is this well-being, and that's more of an attitude. And how does my environment make me feel? And since we have such a sort of a squishy mindset on campus, I mean, we have an 18 to 22-year-old population primarily. Brain development still in formation. We feel that it's a really important thing that we need to do and kind of spread across campus. And I'll show you who our newest sort of the people that us landscape architects really get involved with now are public health folks on campus. Like, they're our great partners. Like, we love public health folks. And this was even before COVID. So this is the definition we use on campus when we're talking about well-being. And I think what this idea, the main word to take out of here, I think, is this fluid human needs, that they change throughout time. And we know the stresses that especially students go through, the kind of the highs and lows as they go through sort of an educational environment, and what the nature as sort of a stalwart can do as a constant element for them. And the research, World Health Organization, CDC, all this stuff supports sort of this idea of well-being, that it's a little bit genetic, it's a little bit the medical care. I don't want to underplay that medical care and sort of access to that is critically important, but it's really physical and social environment that really has some of the largest impacts on your health and well-being outcomes. This is getting way too much probably into the weeds, but I do like to show that this idea of chronic disease versus communicable disease, and knowing that, COVID, a communicable disease, has some chronic sort of outcomes of it. But this idea that the chronic diseases, the asthma, the heart disease, diabetes, obesity, things like that, things that the physical environment can actually change, or we can do things in the physical environment to improve or enhance those things. And the healthcare system is really set up to do the communicable disease sort of thing. We're really good at that, but we're not so good at the chronic sorts of diseases. And I think we're seeing that as we go across, and hospitals are starting to prescribe nature as sort of an outcome. So I promise this is all getting into Willow Creek. It's all relating back to Willow Creek, right? And so that's the final slide on some of this, this health stuff. We see it as really these dials that we can turn. So if we have sort of on the left side, some of these outcomes that we're trying to change in people's lives, there's always a design response for those, right? So if we look at something very sort of basic and consider like heat islands are rising in cities, right? Our cities are getting hotter. Well, what's that going to mean for humans? Well, conceivably lots of things, but also our kidneys are going to have to work harder, right? They're under more stress. What's a design response to that? We can plant more trees. We can make an effort to shade our canopy and kind of reduce that sort of impact on human health. So that's the way that we see, there's a sort of, a health component to what I feel landscape architecture is doing and what we can do on campus in general. These are the folks that we love, the population health folks on campus. I'm not going to read this one, but the big takeaway is this, and why they feel that partnering with campus planning is so important, is that they do policies and programs a lot. They're really good at that. And I think many people are good at pumping out these things, but very low attendance typically, or the amount of effort to put a program together, and then the actual the outcome you have, or the input you change someone, it's pretty minimal. But when you can embed this stuff in the environment, and especially the environments that our students or faculty and staff are going through on a daily basis, the health outcomes can become much more greater amplified. So that's why that's sort of that relationship. But in order for this to happen, we have to listen to Beyonce and move to the left. And so what my goal at campus is, I'm always trying to move to the left as far as possible, to get to the business case side of the equation, and not be, let's bring in the landscape architect, or let's bring in campus planning once we have a project ready to go, sort of thing. It needs to be on the evolution side of things. So that's my worldview. That's what I hope for campus planning. And that's what we're trying to do at UW. So let's pivot back to Willow Creek. And previously here, when I talked about sort of the Ho chunk that were here before us. So the red rectangle, this is Willow Creek. We have documented burial mounds, nationally recognized location on campus of extent burial mounds within the project site. We wanted to address those with this project, and I'll show you how we address those. You can also see some of the other significant sort of habitation sites in this area of campus. And this map, which is Aaron Birdbear, kind of led me to the Charles Brown sort of Dane County trail map. So he worked for the Wisconsin Historical Society as an archaeologist, but these were sort of all the encampments around this space. So obviously drawn to water, drawn to this place for a very particular reason. As Aaron Birdbear likes to say, the marshes of Madison were like the Walmarts for the Native people, right? They had everything they needed at their fingertips. So Willow Creek was one of those areas. So this is another aspect here that we're looking at in all of our sort of campus planning projects. And we understand campus history pretty well from really a settler colonialism standpoint forward. What we don't understand very well, or what we tend to turn our minds to, I guess, because it's easier, is if all of these red bars here, sorry, Luke, if all those red bars get condensed into the red bar in this map, there's a lot more time that we're actually part of. And we're really just on this continuum of time and as we develop the land that we do have. So you can see how much change has happened in such a short amount of time. So how can we honor sort of this longer, more than 175 years of campus time frame? Let's go back into the archives, 1875. You can see Willow Creek. At the time, I don't know if it was more of an ephemeral, but it was sort of a water channel. I think stories of farmers kind of bringing horses down to this area, this lowland, this marshy lowland of campus. You can see how it meanders into Lake Mendota, how wide sort of the mouth of the confluence became. Just kind of the natural way of like a dirt moving machine, right? If you look as a creek is really just a dirt moving sort of machine. How those sort of fan out when they get to a large body of water. This map is great. This might be the map that we just gave Luke. I'm not sure, but this map is great. If we zoom in sort of to the area, I don't have a box around it here, but what a couple of things pointed out here, sort of really all of this sort of wetland area to the west of Willow Creek and even up into the class of 1918 marsh area. What's also interesting is sort of this sandbar that connects across University Bay. You can kind of see a dashed black, sort of a black pepper trail that's kind of going through there. So we sedimentation occurring, even at this early sort of stage back then. Some other views. The bridge that's there now is not the original Park and Pleasure Drive bridge. This is either the second or third bridge that's there now, but this image would suggest that maybe the lake was lower than it is now in the condition. And I think even this image would further suggest that idea. This is looking out in the bay towards Picnic Point. You can see Picnic Point starting to become more populated with vegetation. Was not the wooded sort of peninsula that it is now. If you can imagine, this area was very, very sparsely populated, very few trees, mostly grassland. I think one of the images, I don't know if these are willows. They don't fully look like willows, but I mean, that's why it's originally called Willow Creek, as far as we can tell. And then just another image from 37 where you can start to actually see that sandbar in the image kind of stretching across. And to this day, we still do dredge to get to the boat access point and to help sort of our crew teams in this area of the bay. So where are we today? We've seen the past. Today, then, this is a beautiful image, isn't it? No. We've done some changes to it, some of the adjacencies without actually touching the creek proper. So this was a recent project, 2018, where we created really a rec well sort of area on campus. So this is really what this project was about, was stormwater and capturing a large quantity of stormwater underneath it in a sort of a gallery sort of system, and then using the wetland borders on its edges before it discharges into the creek itself. This is a common sort of image, how you would see it. This was in spring of, I don't know, a couple of years ago. And then in order to make our case, we find the worst image that we can find, and we sketch on it and tell you what's wrong with it so we can get the most interest. But you can start to see sort of erosion, sort of these, large trees on the bank. Trees are really not good at holding banks. Their root structures aren't set up for that sort of thing. Really narrow planting buffers between mowed turf. So separated from the path. Like I would challenge you to realize that there's a creek next to you when you're walking on the west side of Willow Creek today. All this then in the context and why so much interest really was because of the adjacent development that we knew was going to happen and that we foresee happening in the area. So going back to some of these early planning efforts, 2015, bunch of brown boxes. So if you've been to this part of campus, it's changed dramatically since 2015 with the addition of first the Meat Science building and then the parking structure lot. I think it's lot 37. And now both the Gym Nat project, which has been known as, which is now the Baki Recreation and Wellbeing Center, and then the Vet Med addition to the south of Observatory. So especially the Baki and Vet Med and how they plug into Willow Creek wasn't part of those projects. Like it wasn't their responsibility to fix that part of the creek. But there's some adjacencies and some uses that we knew were going to happen. So let's see, this is from the 2015 plan. Again, this idea of, widening the creek, laying back the slopes, kind of really blurring the lines between, building, creek, interaction with pedestrians, things like that. I'm not going to talk too much about this slide, just to know that Andy Reese is a sort of an amazing sort of stormwater guru when he talks about this stuff and sort of the paradigm shifts of stormwater management. But really where the initial title came from in this Back to the Future idea, which is, it's not fully cooked in my head yet, but this idea that green infrastructure is like the new savior of our stormwater. When we started out with, really, that's how it started out, right? So going back to that. Hubs and corridors, we talked a lot about this in the master plan and how this network of open spaces, like we don't have space to do, big sort of large detention basins or things like that. But this idea of using networks and the corridors that we have. And then this is just a sort of a graphic showing really where the Baki is, Vet Med, and the lakes to the north and the outfalls to the south. But you can start to see sort of the density that's being added in this area. This will be the new sort of approach, and you can see this today actually if you go out there, because for the most part the structures are up, the facades of Baki are being clad right now, and Vet Med is pretty much at topping out phase. I think it has topped out actually. So this idea of how you enter from the west into this part of campus. Vet Med will probably have one of the larger green roofs on campus. So the health and well-being aspects, a hospital for people who can't speak is really how they sell it. So that was a big part of the program when they did that. also be 100% bird-friendly building, which is great. Unfortunately, their building camera is set not in a good location. This is the best view I can get you of today's shot. It looked great when it was coming out of the ground, but now it's pretty much plugged up. But that's Vet Med. And then Baki just to the north, so across the street, this space. That camera is much better positioned. And you can see the foreground is the ice sheet. So this would be the community ice sheet. And then the rest of sort of health and well-being aspects for the student and community population. That's a site plan. So a very unique sort of building. You can see how it's not shaped like any other building on campus. The idea is it becomes sort of an icon in a green space, was really the underlying party of this all. And then how the sort of fluidity of the northwest corner in particular starts to sort of step back and honor sort of the creek movements that we saw, some of the effigy mounds in the area. And then taking that a step further, knowing that we are sort of trying to embrace the effigy mounds on the site. There will be a sort of an art installation of the 12 clans just north of the building. And this is an image of what that might look like, working on sort of a central sort of drum circle seating area right now with this project, but should be pretty cool when it's done. And then, yeah, ultimately, how can Baki there on the right side as a big brown blob, how can that sort of start to plug in with the thing, with the creek? So pivot number 2, I promised to, and this is be another one, the West Campus District Plan, which you may have heard of or may not have. Hopefully you do hear about it in the near future. But we're sort of just ending the sort of discovery phase of this project. And really what we're trying to do is create a compelling and actionable vision for West Campus to really energize internal and external stakeholders to look at growth revenue strategies on campus. So this was really put in motion from doing a lot of the things, kind of squeezing the turnip as much as possible here, increasing enrollment, expanding degrees, getting as much philanthropic support as we can. But really real estate is the one thing that this project's trying to look at. And what's important from the real estate standpoint is there's now an agreement between UW-Madison and the Board of Regents and University Research Park that essentially the research park can help us do what they're doing 4 miles away on campus. And we're super excited about this and the potential for industry partnerships and creating incubator space to grow research on campus. They can deliver projects at a quicker pace for us. So there's lots of benefits that we see with this. And it comes down, there's the Vice Chancellor for Finance Administration's office would give you a much better presentation on this. But essentially what we're doing is we're trying to maintain with our peer institutions, both the Big Ten and really the national peer institutions. And it all goes down to our HERD ratings, which is like a national sort of research rating. We've slipped in the past. I think we're number 8. We want to be in the top 5. So what that means is revenue is like 40% of the pie of revenue on campus. So it's the biggest chunk. It's the most important part. It's a lot of the reason why we're doing what we're doing. So this project is going to get at how can we make it more enticing to recruit, to retain, and to grow research. Essentially, I think this is what I kind of just said with that. There's too many words on that slide. So what have we heard so far on this? Need research space. We need industry partnerships. Since this is West Campus, it makes sense to kind of align with the health sort of things that we have 3 hospitals in this part of campus, the VA, the Children's Hospital, and UW Health. How do we coordinate federal agencies? We have a lot of federal land in this part of campus. We see some synergies there. But natural environment, that's come out pretty clearly in what we're doing here. And really the only reason why I mentioned this plan in context of Willow Creek, because of the sort of the amenity that this place can become. But we do have challenges, of course. Anytime we're sort of adding density or wanting to develop land, we need to ensure sort of this community buy-in and support, especially to Village of Shorewood Hills and our residents in the Regent neighborhood to the south. We know the hospital wants to grow, which is good. We know they're growing on the east side, but they also want to grow in situ, which is positive. But there's severely constrained by the land that's available. The private business integration, how does that happen? What does that look like? and still maintain sort of the Wisconsin idea and the Wisconsin way. Who gets in sort of idea. And then mobility. How do we get people into, out of, around, through? If you're adding more bodies, BRT is going to help. We're putting a lot in BRT, but we know it's not the only solution. So mobility will be huge. If you want some more information, that's where you can find it. Of course, there's a website, and you can email me directly if you'd like. So let's get back to the creek, pivot back. Design recommendations. We had a lot of options. We had a couple options. We came up with one preferred option. And that option has both ecological and experiential sort of recommendations that go through it. So from an ecological standpoint, laying back the banks, kind of getting it back to a condition that it wanted to be in, knowing that we can't wiggle the creek or waggle the creek as much as we'd like, but we can lay back the creek. Native cover, 80% graminoid, so grasses, 20% forbs is what we'd like to shoot for. And then leaf coverage, sparse trees with low leaf indices. So not like Norway maples, not heavily dense things. We want stuff underneath to grow that's going to really go down and root in sort of the bank condition and allow for sort of the bounce that occurs after storm events along this creek. Yeah, we're looking at more native aggressive species is what we're really kind of looking at in this area. Establishment of bars and banks within the creek itself for aquatic vegetation. And then continued disconnection of really the pipes that feed into Willow Creek and really, can cause sort of the contaminants that we don't want to get into the bay. So some of the ideas of this, if we harden the shore to have some sort of access points, we're looking at the southern sort of section. Those become step down points, touch points to the water. We can talk about the cleanliness of this water, but it's from an urban watershed. Obviously, don't want to probably be wading in the water, but the idea of touching the water symbolically and important, I think, from a health and well-being standpoint. And then how do we use sort of revetments or other sort of conditions to harden the edge, but in a green way, so that can take sort of the flows that do occur here. Because theoretically, most of Willow Creek is really conceived as probably an embayment more than a creek. It's really just, it has very low flow, and it's always at the elevation of the lake. So it's, the water's not stagnant, but it's not flowing super hot in any sort of high capacity. So this is what sort of the mouth of the creek could look like. So what it's showing is the existing bridge in the north, and then the southern, the lower sort of section is showing this new sort of grand bridge gesture, and the importance of raising that, to get sort of a 6-foot gap underneath the bridge and for the water flow. So we can actually get a kayaker under it. That's one of the main reasons for this idea of opening this up. We can look at that a serial sort of section idea throughout the entire creek if you want, but this is sort of the ideas from existing to proposed. This slides probably shouldn't be thrown in here, but it's in here anyways. But so we essentially all this is showing is that we have requirements to meet sort of our TSS loading through our permit, our MS4 permit with other municipalities in the area. And really what this is showing is that we can do a bunch, we can reduce a lot of our TSS through either land use changes, including things adjacent to Willow Creek, or we can do them through sort of additional capture mechanisms. One of them being adaptive management, which means kind of going off-site. But you can see sort of the 40% reduction we can meet on campus, 73% reduction of TSS, much more difficult to meet. And would require sort of adaptive management. That's like the third pivot. I probably shouldn't have pivoted there, but so the other recommendations then experiential ones, and we had sort of the ecological ones, the experiential ones. So celebrating the creek, making it look more like a creek, I think, with looped pathways, sort of access points, touch points, more what we're calling these episodic moments. So, pause points along the creek experience, supporting, silent sport recreation, supporting fishing, supporting health and well-being aspects, and then taking cues from the context. So I think this image sums up a lot of what's going on here, and this idea of some sort of signature bridge element at the mouth of the creek that relates back to sort of, the hydrologic conditions of the creek, but also sort of the effigy mounds in the area relating to the new Bakke Center sort of structure. And really, this bridge is actually projecting further out into the lake and actually getting out of the effigy mound area. So that's one of the big moves here, is to get away from the mounds that are currently being sort of infringed upon. The bridge does become quite large because it's seen as a sort of an emergency bridge. So it could take vehicular traffic if need be, because we're thinking of resiliency. If Observatory Bridge goes down, that's the only connection we have between north and south at this point. So this idea that this could function in some capacity if need be, but also then becoming more than a bridge, right? It's a place to pause, and overlook, a meet me at the sort of moment. These two diagrams, the one on the left is really this idea of looped pathways. We heard a lot about this. If I could, I have a 15-minute lunch break, could I go out and do a 1-mile loop? So, setting up sorts of conditions where that could happen. And the image on the right really shows the solid blue is the existing creek, and the dashed blue is the proposed sort of creek, and how we can, get a little bit of east-west movement in the creek, but really it's focused kind of on the confluence in the mouth. This is the waypoint that we're talking about, and the reason why that bridge needs to get up to a certain elevation. So this could be a stopping point, could be in conjunction with the Union. You could see checking out a kayak at the Union, kind of bringing it all the way around here. The Bakke is set up with a door on this side of the building. You could go in, sort of use the restroom, do whatever, sort of idea. Could also become a sort of a teaching classroom area. This is looking south at the Biotron, which is not on here, but the Biotron site would be probably one of the first West Campus district plan sort of outcomes. So that project would then be responsible for kind of doing this first, touch point to the creek. Vet Med is on the left side of this image. Then this is even further sort of north. And the importance, what you're seeing back there is really sort of a reflection point. In conjunction with Vet Med. What we heard a lot about is sort of the grieving process if you lose an animal. So this idea of more of a secluded sort of silent space that you can go in those sorts of times. So a very different experience along the creek. And then these are just zoomed in here so you can kind of get some of the detail of what's going on. But moments of seeing how the adjacencies, knowing that, how these things can kind of work out in the grand scheme. And then this lower area, this is where our grounds facilities are really located right now. So we're looking at how we can consolidate them into this area. So that plan also kind of put a method forward for that. Implementation strategy. The long and short of this is that there's really kind of what we identified as 4 reaches. And there is some logic to how we'd implement these, but it's not necessarily, they're not contingent on each other. Obviously, if we want to do reach 3, which has a kayak waypoint in it, we'd have to do reach 4 first, which is the bridge to get to that point, right? So there's some logic behind it, but we can be opportunistic about when funding or when projects sort of plug into the space. We do not see it as really, we're not going to do this from north to south at one fell swoop. And then, of course, we have the other 2 areas to discuss. It's still, sort of ongoing, the dredging of the bay, what we do out there, and then the grounds as a consolidation sort of project. So in ending, next steps, right? The city's very interested in still partnering with us, which we're super thankful for. How can we sort of continue to partner with others, Dane County, maybe, other sorts of nonprofits, possibly. We have to start getting into sort of the flow modeling so we can set up the design development phases, understand what the West Campus District Plan is going to do, knowing that Biotron might be the first site. And then, confirming programming and going forward. So I think all the pieces are there. We just have to, put it into a package and start kind of selling it like we are now and building interest. So with that, you're tired of listening to me talk. So 8:45. We have 15 minutes for questions.
Excellent. Round of applause for Aaron Williams. Giving us a breakdown on the Willow Creek master plan. Super interesting, as they all are. So did your son do a drawing of me?
No, I can have it happen then.
Okay. Promises made. So we will take some questions in here. We'll take some online as well, but we'll start with anyone in here. We have a couple questions, and then we'll go virtually.
Hi, early on you mentioned the difference between you'd mentioned maintain versus managed landscapes. What is that?
Yeah, so the easiest way to look at those is I would say our grounds department is very good at maintenance, mowing, pruning, leaf removal, things like those. Management is what our Lakeshore Nature Preserve does, and that's the 300 acres of preserved land on the 4 miles of lakefront. And that's a management approach. They only have 3 people, a couple interns, and a bunch of volunteers. But it's much more of a, plant the right plant and create an ecological community and let it do what it's supposed to do. So we're not going in and mowing that stuff every week, or so it's lower inputs, but it has to be, I guess, more intelligent in a sense that you have to be strategic about when you're going in to attack invasives or, what type of plant communities you're trying to create and that will thrive in this sort of condition.
Hi, Aaron.
Yeah.
You indicated at the start, you talked about some permitting issues with the sedimentation project. What were kind of the major DNR permitting issues you kind of run across this?
Yeah, I knew you were going to hit me on this. Come on, Lauren here. I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know. It was run by the city, that project. I just know it took a lot longer than it should have. There was issues about, we have a creek, an open creek, and you want to concrete it for 200 feet, which is a lot of concrete. And it was seen as sort of environmental degradation of that. We had to sort of prove the point that there's 1,900 other acres of in a pipe condition. This is 200 more, but what we're trying to do is, rectify the other stuff up here that we've damaged. So we had to sell that sort of idea that this is a good thing to do. I don't know all the permits involved. I know there is, I know we had a bat species. We had to deal with the bat species and make it a home. So we had that sort of permit issue, but yeah, any good civil engineer would know all of those permits. You're trying to get at the Lake Monona waterfront and what we're going to need to do there. I know where you're going with that question.
How does your department of limnology involved with the results of changing the way the creek operates?
Good question. Yeah, Jake Van der Zanden, I believe. We touched base, not fully involved in what was going on probably here. We did reach out to a number of sort of, other sort of creek morphology experts. But it's not a natural condition. So it's so like urbanized in how it functions that there isn't a lot of, it's like if we do this, we're not going to bring back like, grade A trout fishing or, amazing sort of aquatic diversity or species. So we've engaged, I don't recall any sort of big takeaways, why plus or for.
Aaron, the vision for this is amazing. I mean, the pictures, the concept's beautiful, very transformative. What's your experience been like trying to get, first of all, these ideas accepted through the university system, right? You got a lot of layers there to deal with. And then getting the budget, the dollars budgeted and taking it to implementation. Like, do you have like a big challenge that you've encountered or maybe a big success that you want to speak to?
Sure. Yeah, no, the system's not an issue. I mean, they're our partners. They're great. A lot of this is really the precedent for this is East Campus Mall. If we look at East Campus Mall, that was started with, there was sort of a first project that did a piece of it. And then once they saw the success of that, every other piece sort of followed. So we really do see that we need to lead with something big, I think, as well as the Lake Monona waterfront needs to lead with something impressive. So if the bridge could be that piece, I think the other things become much easier. If that's not possible, then since we're an institution, we're not going anywhere. Time is on our side. And we've seen that, the plan may morph and change, but the idea I think is strong enough that something will happen. It might not be in this exact form, but something will happen. So yeah, it will move forward. I don't think the challenges by any of those entities will be something we can't overcome. I mean, yeah, that probably didn't answer your question, but I'm trying to punt.
We have some more virtual questions now.
Thank you, Max. We have a question, and then Aaron, I think this was kind of covered, but maybe kind of hammer it again. Dan was asking about stormwater infrastructure that directs water to Willow Creek, and does this project seek to change or reduce that runoff to Willow Creek?
So the 1,900 acres upland is the city Willow Creek watershed project. They've just come out. I just went to a presentation where they've released ideas of how they're going to take some actions in that watershed directly to accommodate, the 2% or the 500, 100-year storm, whatever it is. One of those big things is upsizing the pipes, but there's other sort of green infrastructure elements that they can do. On campus, then, of the 12 pipes or so that feed into Willow Creek, what we're looking at is, when projects come along, how can we either disconnect those direct outfalls into the creek and, or combine them with other sort of green infrastructure techniques. So having to, in order, so from my standpoint, having to see the big picture of everything we're trying to do here in the outcome, and then knowing that each of these things is really project-based, attacking them at that level is how we're going to do that.
Oh, wait, we still have a few minutes for some more questions if we have them. Or are all questions answered? Well, looks like Aaron could have spoke for a couple more minutes, but that'll have to do it. So Aaron Williams with UW-Madison's campus planning and landscape architecture. One more round of applause. Thanks, Aaron. I'm going to see all this unfold. So for next time, coming up on November 9th, that is the next Clean Lakes Alliance Science Café. Go ahead and mark that down. Again, that's November 9th. That'll be here at the Edgewater once again. And next month, we'll be talking with Dane County's botanist, Lars Higdon, to discuss the county's native seed collection efforts. So interesting and kind of in tandem with, again, trying to be respectful as we try to restore and improve some of our natural areas. Programming note, though, next month, Science Cafe, the last of the year. Clean Lakes is taking off December and January, a little bit of a breather for the organization. But again, we'll see you next month, November 9th, bright and early at 8 o'clock for Dane County botanist Lars Higdon. So we'll see you then. Once again, I'm meteorologist Max Saparis. I'm over at WKOW. Appreciate your time, and we're proud sponsors with Clean Lakes. And again, we will see you in just under a month. Thanks so much.